Welcome into Group Chat Football Live. I'm Peter Ariz alongside D Money. We've been talking about North Carolina a lot lately. I have my Tar Heel blue on right here on my hat, and Bill Belichick keeps it rolling. He's been really building the trenches, really adding the size. But recently, here with his son Steve Belichick coming over as defensive coordinator from Washington, we see Armand Hawkins working the secondary, who comes over from the Huskies as well, and a big transfer here with Thaddeus Dixon coming over. A lot of movement in that Washington secondary with guys coming in, guys leaving, but someone who was a very productive player for Washington over the last few years makes his way to Chapel Hill.
Yeah, listen, we know Bill Belichick loves DBs. That is his favorite position on the field, so it's no surprise he's putting a huge effort to upgrade that room. Thaddeus Dixon, four-star transfer, 6'1", 186, from Los Angeles, California. Out of high school, went to Long Beach City Community College. That allowed him to have the Diego Pavia exception. So when Diego Pavia got his ruling on the injunction, that freed up Thaddeus Dixon to have another year of eligibility. This is someone that played during Washington's run to the finals last year. So past two seasons, 27 of 28 games, 13 starts, 12 this year. 69 tackles, 16 pass breakups, a pair of picks in his career. Like I mentioned, had a tackle and a pass breakup in the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon last year, 2 tackles in both playoff games. So watching him on film, this is a guy who visited Ole Miss, another school that loves transfer defensive backs and has had success there. You see a guy with length. You see a guy with tremendous acceleration. He had a play against Louisville. Isaac Brown, the running back, sent him flying in the bowl game. Also picked off John Mateer at Washington State. And just, watching him more in depth, he's not the most fluid guy in the world, but 6'1", 185, great length and size. He looks big, and he just has that burst when he does put his foot in the ground that he can accelerate at a very high level. This is part of a trend, and you kind of hinted at this, right? You have Belichick's son, Steve Belichick, who's a defensive coordinator at Washington, comes over. And then, you bring in Armand Hopkins with him. Armand Hawkins is from San Bernardino, California. That is about 30 miles east of Los Angeles. Who's from Los Angeles? Thaddeus Dixon, right? You also have Kamori House, the linebacker, one of the other prize 4-star transfers that came into North Carolina from Washington, and he's from L.A.
Peyton Waters,
who we talked about in a previous episode, young, promising defensive back with great tools, comes over from Washington. He's from L.A. And Jason Robinson, the receiver from Washington, comes over from L.A. So the West Coast ties, particularly the Southern California ties of Armand Hawkins, you see it with each of these Washington transfers that I just went through, and Thaddeus Dixon is just the latest one. You read about it. Seems that Dixon did not want to move to the nickel position. Washington brought in Tacario Davis, 6'4", long corner, outside corner all the way from Arizona, number 1 corner in the portal. And there's some sentiment that, Washington wanted to move Dixon inside to nickel. And he's like, hey, I'm an outside corner. You just brought in somebody else to play my spot. Of course, you hear fans talk about it on the Washington end, and they're talking about, hey, this Pavia thing came out of nowhere. We thought we were going to lose you. How are we going to put you in the future plans? We didn't even know you were going to have you. Here you see the tweet that Thaddeus Dixon ended up reposting, saying because he's transferring, because he's getting pushed out of his position. We put him in the situation where he either has to choose to move across the country, obviously he did, or move from cornerback to nickel. Rocking a hard place, respect whatever he decides to do. Obviously, he chose to go across the country and play for a DB guru in Bill Belichick, his former defensive coordinator in Steve Belichick, and his former position coach, fellow Southern California native Armand Hawkins. So that's how it all kind of came together. And when you look at it, it makes a lot of sense for it doesn't make sense for Washington necessarily, although they're feeling pretty good at outside corner with Tacario Davis. But it makes sense for him, for North Carolina, and it's going to give them another man coverage corner, which is what Bill Belichick lives for. He did a scouting Bible back when he was with the Giants, right? He kind of went through every position and what he can tolerate, meaning like from a scouting perspective, like we can live with this, but we got to have this trait. For corners, it was very simple. We want guys that can cover man, play the ball in the air. That's what he's looking for, and that's what hopefully he got with Thaddeus Dixon.
18 incoming transfers now for North Carolina. So again, you look at what Bill Belichick has been trying to do here, and it's a lot of body types, a lot of smaller school guys, so a lot of evaluations involved here. And it's just coming in now that offensive lineman Daniel King, who we spoke about, who was visiting, has also now committed to North Carolina. So that's another one now in the books.
Breaking news, North Carolina fans, we did a video on Daniel King sort of breaking down his game, so you could go back and watch that. We put that out on the group chat Football Live. So if you are a North Carolina fan, we put a ton of videos out, pretty much every single commit, portal guy, coaching change on UNC. We've made a video. So please like and subscribe if you want to keep up with the latest in UNC's portal efforts. We're going to keep up with recruiting as well. Spring, we will keep you posted on UNC and really every team in the country that's making moves, but very few teams making as many moves as UNC. And Pete, while we're talking about Dixon, let's just run right into this one, Daniel King, because we did the video before, but now that he's official, I think this reflects the size emphasis that Michael Lombardi talked about in some of his interviews, where he said, we want to be a big team up front. New England's offensive line was not particularly big, but UNC is going to be bigger than their opponents with a guy like Daniel King, who is, over 340 pounds, actually came into college at 270. It was listed, but he's grown immensely. Like it says in the tweet, 2,642 snaps, played some OT, but mostly guard, multiple-time All-Sun Belt performer. Watched him play. Just sometimes overwhelms guys in pass blocking. He's pretty athletic. He's not overwhelmingly athletic, but he's pretty athletic. We talked about in the last show, Senior Bowl, they had him on the watch list. He was someone to keep an eye on from an NFL perspective. And you bring in a Miles McVay, who's a mammoth, right, to UNC, who's just a giant man from Alabama, himself over 340 pounds. So you got another 340-plus pounder on that offensive line for North Carolina, both from the portal. Difference between King and Miles McVay, the Alabama transfers. And Miles McVay played a little bit. King has a ton of experience. We also have Chad Lindbergh coming from Rice, originally signed with Georgia. So another blue chip body type, 6'6", 315, big dude. And William Boone, 6'6", 340 pounds from Prairie View A&M, another big kind of late blooming guy with lower level experience, in that case FCS, but a lot of it. And of course he has the size, which is overwhelming even at the ACC level. You also bring in Crystal Kelly as your center from Holy Cross, not as big as all these other guys, but athletic, someone who's been productive. Of course, Holy Cross, not too far from his old neck of the woods in Foxborough, so you knew that was a natural fit there. So you heard these guys talk about it. We wanted to rebuild the offensive line. It was the first priority. They were vocal, and then they said, we want to be big. They've lived up to their promise, right? We just went through the sizes of these guys. Whether they perform, we'll see. They do bring back some returning starters, so there's going to be competition because there's only 5 spots here. But I think this is a huge move with Daniel King, and it fits in line with their previous moves, as does Thaddeus Dixon, right? So 2 moves that really mirror things that they've already been doing in the portal.
Yeah, and I said this when it comes to the offensive line yesterday. A lot of these guys coming from smaller schools have an opportunity with way more resources at that offensive line spot for them physically, the nutritional plan they're going to have there, the food that's going to be provided to them, the strength and conditioning program, all of that for offensive linemen in particular. It's that growth can really become exponential because of they're going to be exposed to this really for the first time in their football careers.
Absolutely. And look, this is a guy that he was not always this big. He's grown fast. Listed at 270 coming out of high school, I believe in Georgia, where he came out of. So he's somebody who's grown fast, small town guy. And Troy's put out some guys to the NFL. I mean, the most famous, of course, DeMarcus Ware. I believe they also had Usi Umanura. Was he also from Troy? I think he might have been. That Troy had a series of guys go to the NFL as defensive linemen. So there are late bloomers there that they are able to produce.
Yeah, Troy. Usi Umanura, Troy.
So they do produce some late bloomers. In this case, now you have the portal. So those late bloomers, as opposed to blooming into the NFL, you can take them to the ACC level, SEC level, whatever it is, and allow them to compete and show what they can really do against top competition. So some I look at and say, oh man, this is the ACC. Bill, what are you doing taking guys from Troy, from Holy Cross, from Prairie View A&M? But there's a reason, and it's in the case of the offensive line, it's very much about body type. And then with Thaddeus Dixon, who also has some pretty nice dimensions, I think that's more about getting man coverage corners and really opening up that pipeline to Los Angeles, where Armand Hawkins, again, he's from 30 miles east of there in San Bernardino County. See, Belichick has familiarity. Of course, Belichick's name carries across the country. Bills does. So you can recruit corners out there and really add to your room. Think of a Utah. A team like Utah always has a very good secondary. Most of those kids are not from Utah. They do a lot of work in California to stock that secondary. Now there's good corners available in the South, in the Mid-Atlantic, in the South, in North Carolina's recruiting area, but there's no rule that says you can't go over to Los Angeles and to the West Coast and get some really talented corners, and that's what they've done here.
Well, Carolina fans, keep it locked here on Group Chat Football Live. We'll keep you updated with everything going on in terms of recruiting. Spring now will be all over the depth chart battles, the competition in practice. So again, Group Chat Football, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for your support.